The brochure for Cairns is one of the most effective pieces of tourism marketing in Australia. The Great Barrier Reef, the Daintree Rainforest, the Atherton Tablelands, the Cape Tribulation road winding through ancient green hills to a beach where rainforest meets ocean. The photographs are extraordinary because the place is extraordinary. There is no deception in the beauty, only in the completeness of the picture. What the brochure does not include: Cairns has the highest rate of serious assault of any Australian city. The waterways adjacent to the tourist foreshore carry saltwater crocodiles large enough to kill an adult. The reef the tourism industry is built on is dying at a rate the industry has spent decades declining to incorporate into its promotional material. And underneath all of it sits a history of dispossession and colonial violence without acknowledgment, since the first European settlers arrived in the 1870s. In this video, we examine 12 things about Cairns and the surrounding far north Queensland region that the tourism brochure does not include. Things that are documented, ongoing, and consequential. Number 1 is the specific relationship between the reef, the climate, and the tourism industry that profits from it. A relationship so clearly documented and so consistently avoided that it constitutes one of the most sustained institutional evasions in Australian commercial history. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. And let's begin. Cairns sits on the traditional country of the Yiganigi and the Gimua-Walubra-Yidinji peoples, whose connection to this land extends back tens of thousands of years. The city was established in 1876. Within years, the removal of the Aboriginal peoples who had managed and inhabited this country was systematic, violent, and largely unacknowledged. The tourism narrative acknowledges traditional ownership in the formal welcome to country. It does not incorporate this acknowledgement into the commercial identity of what it is selling. 12 things. Starting now. Number 12. The Yiganigi and the Gimua-Walubra-Yidinji and the dispossession that Cairns was built on. The land on which Cairns stands is the traditional country of the Yiganigi people, whose sea country extends along the coast, and the Gimua-Walubra-Yidinji people, whose country covers the tablelands and ranges behind the city. Both peoples managed this country for tens of thousands of years before the first European settler arrived in 1876. The establishment of Cairns was followed within years by the systematic clearing of Aboriginal peoples from the surrounding country, pastoral leases removing Aboriginal access to traditional land, the native police enforcing removal with documented violence, and labour exploitation systems converting traditional owners to cheap workers on dispossessed land. The native police massacres in the Barron River Gorge, the clearing of Aboriginal populations from the Atherton Tablelands for the sugar industry, and the Mamu people of the Innisfail region, whose resistance produced a particularly violent colonial response, are part of the history that sits beneath the Daintree tours and the Atherton Tablelands day trips. The commercial identity of far north Queensland tourism is built on country whose traditional owners were removed by violence within living memory of people who were still alive when the first reef tours began. Number 11. The Kanaka labour system and the workers whose exploitation built far north Queensland's agricultural economy. The sugar industry that transformed the far north Queensland coastal plains in the late 19th century was built partly on the labour of South Sea Islander workers, people from Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, and other Pacific nations brought to Queensland under conditions the historical record describes, in some cases, as indistinguishable from slavery. The practice, known as blackbirding, involved recruiting, or in some documented cases, kidnapping, Pacific Islander workers for Queensland sugar plantations. Workers were paid minimal wages, housed in conditions generating significant mortality, and in many cases prevented from returning home at the end of their contracts. In 1901, the Federated Australian Government passed the Pacific Island Labourers Act, requiring deportation of most Pacific Islander workers as part of the White Australia policy. Workers who had built the agricultural infrastructure of the region were removed. The deportations occurred in 1904 and 1906. Their history, the blackbirding system and the deportation, is not in the Queensland school curriculum in the way it should be, and is not in the far north Queensland tourism narrative that profits from the agricultural landscape their ancestors built. Number 10. The Daintree Rainforest and the specific darkness the tourism narrative leaves out. The Daintree has been continuously forested for approximately 180 million years, predating the Amazon by tens of millions of years. It is World Heritage listed and the country of the Kuku-Yalanji people, who have lived in and managed this rainforest for at least 50,000 years. The specific darkness is the gap between the Kuku-Yalanji's connection to their country and the terms on which tourism has operated in it. For decades, the Kuku-Yalanji People's Management Authority was overridden by state conservation management. The specific dispossession that World Heritage listing can produce when traditional owner's authority is not central to the conservation framework. In 2021, the Queensland government handed back approximately 160,000 hectares of the Daintree to the Kuku-Yalanji people under a co-management arrangement. What the tourism brochure does not include is the specific history that made the handback necessary, the decades of contested authority that preceded it. The rainforest is extraordinary. The history of who was managing it and whose authority determined how it was used is part of what the extraordinary rainforest actually is. Number 9. The saltwater crocodile and the specific gap between the warning signs and the behavior they produce. The tidal waterways, estuaries, rivers, and coastal wetlands surrounding Cairns are home to one of the densest saltwater crocodile concentrations in far north Queensland. The Cairns foreshore itself borders waterways carrying crocodiles large enough to kill an adult human being. The warning signs are present, clear, and photographed constantly by tourists who treat them as exotic atmosphere rather than as safety information requiring behavioral change. The attack record documents a specific pattern. Most serious attacks and fatalities occur among visitors and remote community members using waterways for recreational or subsistence purposes without adequate risk awareness, not among long-term residents who know the protocols. The tourism industry benefits commercially from the crocodile's presence, the jumping crocodile tours, the wildlife park displays, the exotic danger appeal, while having a financial interest in the risk not being presented in terms that discourage visitors. The crocodile is simultaneously a tourism product and a genuine safety hazard. People have been killed. The warning signs are there. The behavior they are meant to produce is not consistently produced. Number 8. The Great Barrier Reef and the tourism industry's specific relationship with its decline. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth, stretching 2,300 kilometres along the Queensland coast. It is the foundation of the far north Queensland tourism economy, the primary reason most of Cairns' 3 million annual visitors come. The reef is dying. The Australian Institute of Marine Science has documented bleaching events of increasing frequency and severity since 1998. The 2016 and 2017 events killed approximately 50% of coral in the northern sections. The 2022 bleaching event affected coral across all regions. The industry has been aware of the deterioration for decades and has not incorporated the documented trajectory into its public communications. The reef tourism industry cannot simultaneously market the Great Barrier Reef as a world-class destination and communicate accurately that it is experiencing mass mortality events. The people who come to Cairns to see the reef are not, in the main, being shown the bleached sections. They are being shown the sections that still look like the brochure. The reef is dying. The tourism industry that profits from it is not telling its visitors the complete truth. Number 7. Cairns' assault rate and the social crisis the tourism economy sits above. Cairns has the highest rate of serious assault of any Australian city. This statistic appears in Queensland Police Service data, Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission reports, and criminology research. It is not in the tourism marketing. The causes are documented. Remote community populations travelling to Cairns for services produce specific social pressures around transit points where poverty, alcohol, and inadequate service provision create volatile conditions. The housing stress of a city where tourist accommodation demand competes with residential supply intensifies cost pressures on low-income residents. The assault risk is not uniformly distributed. The tourist areas, the esplanade, the night markets, the reef tour departure points, are not the areas of highest risk. The tourism economy and the social crisis coexist in the same city while being largely spatially separated. Most tourists do not directly experience the crisis. It is present in the same streets, at the same time, in different parts of the same city. Number 6. The Palmer River goldfields and the racial violence that Australia's largest gold rush produced. In August 1873, James Venture Mulligan discovered gold on the Palmer River, approximately 280 kilometres northwest of Cairns. The rush that followed was the largest in Australian history, approximately 35,000 people in 2 years. The majority were Chinese. At the peak, Chinese miners outnumbered Europeans 8-1. The response of the European minority was systematic and violent. Anti-Chinese riots occurred at multiple locations on the field. European miners attacked Chinese settlements, destroyed equipment, and drove legally established miners from their claims. The colonial government introduced legislation specifically restricting Chinese immigration and ownership on the goldfields. The Aboriginal peoples of the Palmer River region, the Kokowara and surrounding nations, were simultaneously displaced by both European and Chinese miners, and engaged in specific resistance to the invasion of their country. The administrative centre Palmerville is now the ghost town of Maytown, accessible only by four-wheel drive. The Palmer River Gold Rush is the founding economic event of far north Queensland. Its racial violence is not in the tourism narrative that profits from the region it opened. Number 5. The Cape Tribulation Road and the specific conditions north of the Daintree crossing. The Cape Tribulation Road is one of the most photographed drives in Australia. It also has the highest density of genuine hazard warnings of any tourist route in Queensland. The signs are not tourism aesthetics. They mean what they say. Cassowaries cross the road without warning. The cassowary is the third largest bird on Earth, capable of running at 50 km per hour and delivering a kick that can disembowel a human being. The warning signs are genuine safety advisories, not exotic birdwatching prompts. The creek crossings north of the Daintree are tidal and crocodile inhabited. The road closes during the wet season. The specific conditions, rainfall, flooding, road closures, isolation, produce a risk environment radically different from the dry season conditions in which most tourism occurs. The cassowary population of the Daintree is listed as endangered. The primary cause of cassowary mortality is vehicle strikes on the roads tourists drive through cassowary habitat. The tourists warned by road signs are simultaneously the primary threat to the animals the signs are warning them about. Number 4. Far North Queensland's suicide rate and what lies behind the tropical paradise image. Far North Queensland has one of the highest suicide rates of any Queensland region, in a state already above the national average. The communities with the highest rates are the remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities of Cape York, the communities most distant from the mental health services the rates indicate are needed. The causes are documented: intergenerational trauma of dispossession, stolen generations' damage to family structures and cultural continuity, inadequate mental health services where a professional may visit monthly or less, unemployment, housing stress, and the isolation of communities with high need and low economic activity. Cairns is the regional service centre for these communities. The Queensland health funding for remote far north mental health services has not matched the need. The tourism economy of Cairns and the suicide crisis in the surrounding region are connected by geography and disconnected by everything else: the services, the attention, the funding, the public acknowledgement. The distance between the tropical paradise and the crisis in adjacent communities is not geographic. Number 3. The Irukandji jellyfish and the specific risk that reef tourism does not foreground. The Irukandji jellyfish is the most venomous marine animal on Earth relative to its size, approximately 1 centimeter in diameter, transparent, and effectively invisible in the water. Its sting produces Irukandji syndrome, severe pain, hypertension, pulmonary edema, and in some cases death. The Irukandji is present in Cairns waters during the tropical stinger season, running from October to May. The stinger season covers the entire peak tourist season, when the reef is most accessible and when most of Cairns's 3 million visitors arrive. The Irukandji cannot be seen, cannot be reliably excluded from stinger nets, and produces a syndrome requiring hospitalization in severe cases. The industry response, stinger suits, nets at some locations, does not consistently produce adequate risk awareness. The box jellyfish, whose sting is more immediately life-threatening, is also present during the stinger season. The waters are extraordinary. They are also, during the peak tourist season, specifically hazardous in ways invisible to the eye and inconsistently communicated by the industry whose product depends on visitors entering them. Number 2. Palm Island and the uprising that revealed Queensland's specific failures. Palm Island, B. Doubleman, sits 45 kilometres northeast of Townsville. From 1918 to the 1970s, it operated as a government-run Aboriginal reserve to which Aboriginal people from across Queensland were removed, often forcibly, and confined under a regime restricting movement and managing every aspect of life. The people of Palm Island had not committed crimes. They had been placed there for being Aboriginal. On November 19, 2004, Mulrunji Doomadgee died in the Palm Island police lockup within an hour of arrest for a trivial public order offence. The coronial inquiry found his injuries, a ruptured liver, for broken ribs, consistent with blunt force trauma. The following day, community members set fire to the police barracks, station, courthouse, and sergeant's residence. 17 community members were charged in the largest criminal prosecution of Aboriginal people in Queensland since the frontier era. The Queensland police officer charged with manslaughter was acquitted. The community members who responded to the death were convicted and imprisoned. Palm Island is the story of a community placed on an island by a colonial government, imprisoned for generations, who watched a man die in custody and found that the justice system prosecuted their response to it. Number 1. What Cairns actually is. Cairns is extraordinary. The argument this video makes is not that the tourism brochure is lying about the beauty. The reef is extraordinary. The rainforest is extraordinary. The tropical north of Australia is one of the most significant natural environments in the world. What the brochure is not presenting is the complete picture. The country is Yiganigi and Yidinji country, whose traditional owners were removed by colonial violence within living memory. The agricultural economy was built on South Sea Islander labour whose workers were deported when no longer needed. The Daintree is Kuku Yalanji country whose management authority was contested for decades. The reef is dying at a rate the tourism industry does not communicate. The assault rate is the highest in Australia. The Palmer River Gold Rush produced the racial violence on which the regional economy was founded. The Cape Tribulation road signs mean what they say. The remote communities surrounding the tropical paradise have suicide rates among the highest in Australia. The stinger season makes the ocean specifically hazardous for most of the tourist year. Palm Island was a prison whose community was prosecuted for responding to a death in custody. These are not arguments against visiting Cairns. They are the argument for visiting it with complete information. The complete information does not diminish the beauty. It contextualizes it, places it in the real world rather than in the promotional world in which it is marketed. Cairns is not just a tourist destination. It is a place with a history, a social reality, and an environmental crisis that the 3 million people who visit it each year deserve to know about. Share this video. Subscribe. And the next time you book a reef tour, know what you are seeing and know what is happening to it. See you in the next one.